Hi and welcome back to my channel. My name is Erica. We are on block number 11 of our 2023 Sew With Me series. So we are nearing the end of our sew along for this year. We are on block number 11 today. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you're new and you have missed all of these videos, check back on block number 1. We have a fun sew along that we did this entire year. These videos will always be available, so you can feel free to sew along at your leisure. The patterns are totally free. All the information is below this video, so you can click more or the little down arrow if you are on a tablet or iPhone. And you can always visit my blog at confessionsofahomeschooler.com and just search 2023 Sew With Me. You can also check out the 2021-2022 Sew With Me series as well. We did one last year that was a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and just dive right in and take a look at today's block number 11. So this block is actually one of my favorite blocks because it's these tiny little thread spools, and I've always loved spool quilts, and I wanted to include a cute little spool block in this year's video. And this one, doesn't matter which way it goes, it's adorable no matter which way you turn it. I will say for these smaller blocks, I highly recommend using Mary Ellen's Best Press or pre-starching your fabric before you cut your pieces. Some of these pieces are really small, and that's just going to give your fabric a little bit more stability when you're working with these tiny little pieces. But if you're not into starching, it's totally okay. Just take your time, sew accurately, and be careful when you're pressing that you're not distorting any of your fabric, and you should be good to go. So here is my little Christmas version of this. This is using Fig Tree Christmas stitched fabric. I am loving my tiny little Christmas blocks, and I'm really excited that all year long I have been sewing towards a finished Christmas quilt because it's going to be such a fun project to finish for the holidays. Here is my red and white version. This is the one we will be making in today's video, and I have some fun tips for you. We are actually going to spin this center seam. We've spun some seams here before on previous blocks, but I wanted to show you that you could also do it on a pinwheel type unit as well. It's a great way to distribute some of that bulk in your center of your quilt block where you have all of those seams coming together. So let's go ahead and dive right into today's tutorial and start making this adorable spool quilt block. Don't forget to download your pattern. The link for this pattern will be below this video. You can always go to my blog and search 2023 Sew With Me and find them there. All right, let's go ahead and get started sewing. I am going to set my pieces aside. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our C pieces and, oops, I have these marked wrong. Our A squares. I had those in the wrong place before, so sorry. Hopefully those weren't confusing. And we're going to work on the little, what do you call this part? The wooden spool part of our unit. And these are really going to be super easy. I'm not even going to draw lines on them or anything. We're going to do this all over at our machine. And all we need to make sure that we're doing, just like in the pattern here, is we need to make sure that we're sewing our diagonal lines opposite directions so that we end up with this shape, which is the top of our spool. So we'll take one of our C strips and two of our A squares. We'll place those right side down on opposite sides. And then we're going to, you can draw a line on these if you want. I'm going to use my diagonal seam tape at my machine, so I'm not going to draw all these lines. It's quite a time saver, and I've talked about it a lot on these videos. And we're just going to draw diagonal lines going opposite directions, just like this. We're going to sew on these lines, and then we'll trim a 1/4 inch away, discard this piece over here, and then flip this piece back. And when we press it back, that's going to give us that nice diagonal. Now, something to note on these, I like to sew just a hair to the side of our lines, so towards the outside edge. So I'm going to sew just a hair to this side and just a hair to this side. That'll account for my fabric when I flip it over, and we'll get a little bit more accurate block. All right, let's take all these over to our machine and get sewing. Now here are all of my pieces, and one little trick that I like to do is cut them all at once. And so I kind of tug on them just so they all straighten out at once. And I'm going to put my 1/4 inch line right here on my stitch line. And I just try and make sure that each one of them are lined up so that I'm not cutting too small of a seam allowance, and I'm going to go ahead and just trim them all at once. Just like that. And then I have these other last two. Okay. And then now I can just trim them apart. And I'm actually not even going to press these yet. I'm going to just go ahead and take these back over to my machine and add the other side. Now you can press these whichever way you like. You can press towards the dark. I find on these flipped corners it's a little bit easier to press towards the corner. So I'm just pressing them both at the same time, and then I'll grab another one and just keep going, and I'll just get all these pressed really fast. Okay, so the hard part is done. All of our spool tops are complete. The next thing we need to do is take our D and E squares, and we're just going to sew them together just like this. We have 4 spools, so you're actually going to need 4 of these units sewn together. And when we're done doing that, we can place our B strips on either side and sandwich that in, and then we just need to add our tops. So even though it looks like a lot of little pieces, this block actually comes together really fast. So let's go ahead and sew our D and E rectangles together. Oh, and really quickly, I wanted to point out, sometimes people get worried when they see these pinked edges on pre-cuts. This fat quarter happened to have these pinked edges on it. And what you can do with those pinked edges is either trim them off, or I will place my ruler right at the edge of the pinked edges so they are part of my dimension. So if this is 2.5 inches this way, then all the way to the point is 2.5 inches, not the valley. So the point is my 2.5 inch measurement, if that makes sense. You can also just trim those off if you don't like dealing with them, but I thought I would just mention it since this fat quarter did happen to have pinked edges. Okay, let's go ahead and sew these together. And here they are, and since these aren't going to be lining up against any other seams, I just went ahead and pressed them to the side. So for these, it doesn't really matter which way you press them. And you might notice that I did 2 using these fabrics and 2 using these fabrics. So I'll alternate those blocks. In the pattern, it has you use all 4 blocks are the same colors, but I think if you have some scraps, this is a great way to make just kind of a scrappy, fun thread spool block. So now we need to take these units and sew a B strip to both sides, and then that will be complete, and then we can add our tops and bottoms. So I'm just going to take all of this over to my machine. All right, so here are our spool sections, and just because they're going to be matching up with these seams, I went ahead and pushed these all in, or pressed all of these all in towards the middle. So they're all being pressed towards the darker fabric, and then that's going to help when you go to add your spools. So we're going to add a spool to the top and to the bottom. And this is what you're going to end up with. So we're going to go ahead and take these over to the machine and just go ahead and sew all the tops on and all the bottoms on. Now, if you want to make sure that your seams are all lining up, you can place this right side down. So you can put your needle in right here at 1/4 inch, and then 1/4 inch there. That way when you're sewing along, those seams will line up perfectly. I don't usually do that, and yes, sometimes my seams are a tad off, but I don't worry about it too much. So it's totally up to you whether you want to pin these or not, but I'm going to go ahead and take these to the machine and just sew all of the tops and bottoms on. Then we can press and assemble our block. Now for these blocks, because these diagonal seams are right here, I think it's actually going to be easier to press toward the straight seams. Since we're alternating these blocks, the seams are not going to be hitting each other, so you don't have to worry about it too much. So here is our working block, and here are our 4 finished spools. For the 12.5-inch block, these are going to finish at 6.5 by 6.5. So if you need to, just trim them down. And then I'm going to just place mine going alternating directions. So I've got these two, and I've got these two, and I can change my fabrics. I think I actually like them going like that, so it looks a little bit scrappier. Okay, now we just need to sew our top and bottom row together, and then sew those 2 rows together, trim our block up, and we'll be all done. All right, so here is our block, and I actually just pressed my seams opposite, so I pressed towards the spool fabric. That way, when I press them down like this, these center seams will line up. You could also press these open if you wanted as well. So here is our block. Now just for fun, and because this is a high bulk point, I thought it'd be fun to show you how to spin this seam, because effectively, if you take away the rest of this block, this is basically just a pinwheel here in the middle. And this is a great way to work with pinwheels. So when we flip it over, we'll see here in the center, we have all of our seams going counterclockwise, which is perfect. We just need to work on this seam because this one is the only one that is going down. So with my finger, I'm just going to follow those seams all the way around and press this one up. We're going to end up with an itty bitty pinwheel right there in our center. And let me go press this really quick so you can see what it looks like when we're done. All right, here it is once it's pressed, and look at that cute little pinwheel right there in the center, and all of those points and all of that bulk have been nicely distributed. Here is our finished block. Just trim it up to 12.5 by 12.5. Here is our mini Christmas version. Thank you so much for joining me today. That is going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed block number 11. I would love to see how your little spools are turning out. So if you are sewing along, make sure to share your progress on social media using hashtag 2023SewWithMe. If you tag me at Erica Arndt and I can find that, I will repost your image on my Instagram so that others can see as well. So thank you so much for joining me for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new, and I will see you next month for our last block, block number 12. And then here is our finished block, and here is our little, here is our finished block. You just need to 12 it, you just need to trim it.